I'm Marian Inabinett. I'm the Curator of Collections at the High Point Museum, and the High Point Museum is a historical museum that aims to represent the greater High Point area and the history and the culture and the heritage. I look after the collections, and we have a large collection of objects and photographs and archives.
All right. Marcellus Joyner. I am the Supervisor for the Heritage Research Center at the High Point Public Library. I am also the archivist for the High Point Museum. My major role is to act as the digital curator for our historical materials at both the High Point Museum and the High Point Public Library. I act as a liaison between the two entities. Within the past 10 years, the museum has come under the umbrella of the library. So both entities are an extension of one another.
Well, we already knew about it from the multiple partners who were involved. We knew what the Register of Deeds was up to, getting those things digitized, but we are partners with the UNC-Greensboro Public History Program, so we knew of their involvement in this exhibit and the project that they were working on. And we were very excited for them, and we thought it was really great. And when it opened, one of our longtime supporters of the museum came in. It may have even been the next day, but it was pretty immediately after the opening, and said, y'all need to think about bringing this to High Point. And it really wasn't that long afterwards that the International Civil Rights Center contacted us and said, we'd like to move this around. Let's talk about this. We want to see about this. Is about Guilford County. Let's talk about getting it over here. And so at the High Point Museum, we were really excited about it. We thought it would be a good project. It really ticked a lot of boxes that we were looking to do, and Marcellus and his crew at the Heritage Research Center have been doing a lot of workshops and things to help people understand more about the resources that were available. And we had a lot of a few artifacts and things that we just didn't really have a way to display very well. And so there were a lot of things that worked out for us to bring that over. So we were extremely excited. And certainly our supporter who brought it to our attention and said, you need to think about this, he was over the moon. He was very excited that we had basically kind of taken his suggestion, but I know that it wasn't a hard thing for us to do.
Well, my involvement was kind of a synergy thing. Prior to hearing about the project, Richard Cox, who is works in IT at UNCG, had a website that he was trying to promote the digital library on American slavery. So he came to us in 2014, I believe.
Think so, yeah.
Just asking suggestions on how he could promote and get the message out about his website. People were already using it, but he wanted to get it to a broader audience. So he met with Marian and I, and we threw out suggestions about him going to present at library conferences for NCLA, the North Carolina Library Association, presenting at SNCA, the Society of North Carolina Archivists Association, to get the information out to different historical institutions, to broaden the use of that resource. And happenstance or synergy, as you call it, Richard was contacted as well by a key stakeholder in the project. So I think once all entities were brought together and developed, he was able to use this as an opportunity to promote the website. The website deals a lot with court cases that date back to the 1800s, dealing with slaves and slave owners and plantation owners, as well as runaway slave promotions, wanted posters for runaway slaves. So we just jumped at the opportunity because we knew this was a great opportunity to bring all this information together. A lot of African American information is truncated, and this is an opportunity to bring it together and put it all in one place. My department at the Heritage Research Center, we work specifically with helping people with their genealogy. So, we were all over this, ready to give programs. As myself personally, I did a program on starting your African American genealogy, or as we like to call it, African American Genealogy 101. Well, one important aspect is a lot of people believe that you cannot trace your family past 1865, which was the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery. But that's not a fact across the board for every African American. For the most part, you can trace your family back from the present to roughly about 1870. That was the first census record in which African Americans were documented by name. So it takes a little diligence, but once you trace your family back to 1870, you have to start looking for plantation owners or farm owners who had large portions of land living in your family's vicinity. Sometimes African Americans took on the surnames of their former owners. Sometimes they don't. So proximity plays a very big part once you get into this particular area of research. Compare your family member's identity in the 1870 census to the 1860 slave schedule to try to match up their age and physical description. Once you're able to identify the slave master that owns your family, your next mode of research should be researching that plantation owner thoroughly, looking at any deeds that may have been created by him. If there's personal papers that survive this plantation owner, there's a possibility that your relative or your ancestor could have been named in this deed as a purchase or some type of court record associated with the plantation owner. Because when you're talking about property or you're looking at people as property, you have to name your property. You have to describe it in some type of way. So that's the way for an African American who's doing the genealogy research to get over the hump. You have to change the direction of your research to bring it back to your family member. And it's not 100% for everyone, but it's definitely worth you delving into the research to see if you can make the connection.
We thought about the exhibit, and it was parts of it pretty Greensboro centric. So we wanted to bring it to the greater High Point area, really look, even though the Mendenhalls were brought in, which is Jamestown and right down the road, we wanted to expand that a little bit and talk a little bit more about our Quakers who were very big in High Point. And again, we knew what was going on at the Heritage Research Center and what they were working on and the programs that they were. So we thought, well, we'll put a little bit of a shell around the exhibit that we're getting from the Civil Rights Museum and the Guilford County Register of Deeds. And we wanted to give people more tools, just like Marcellus and how they're doing with their workshops, to give people more tools to get over those humps and figure out different ways to find their genealogy. One of the things that the Civil Rights the exhibit does is ask a lot of questions of the visitor within the exhibit that they had. So there's a lot of questions that they're provoking the visitors to think about. Well, we didn't necessarily want to provide answers because none of those answers are simple. But what we wanted to do was provide more context, more information, more ways that people could come to those answers for themselves. And again, it really fit in with the workshops that our Heritage Research Center was already doing, and a lot of things that we were already doing was supporting the notion that history is complex, that there is no one way to get to an answer. There's lots of pieces to the puzzle, and there's lots of ways that you can approach finding those pieces and bringing them together. So we were very, I think, very, very conscientious about not providing people answers, but providing them information of how they can find those answers, or that there was other information that maybe they need to think about as they were formulating their own answers to those questions.
Yes, just trying to give them the facts. Give them the facts. I think a lot of people interpret this period in time as just being, for lack of a better description, black and white. But there's a lot of gray areas. So we didn't want to lead anybody in a particular direction, but just state the facts and let them sort the information out for themselves. Let them process it without pushing them in a direction of how they should process it, but letting them process the information for themselves and dealing with it accordingly.
And we brought in a lot of things like maps, the slave schedules, various censuses, to help people to understand that these, and wills, we did a lot with the wills and the other kinds of documents that are available. They might not all be digitized, but they're getting there. Or even if they're not digitized, there's a way to find out now where those things, church records, where they're all available, that they might be able to find those things. And it was very funny in a conversation that we had with an official of High Point, one of the city officials, and he was saying, well, is this all new information? And we went, no, it's all been available. I mean, all this stuff has been microfilmed for 50 years or more. It's just now the great thing is you don't necessarily have to go to that repository or some Heritage Research Center,
right.
or to some Guilford Register of Deeds office somewhere far away to find that information. And so what we were very hoping people would come away with is that, and not just African American visitors, but other people, to say, we can find a fuller story. There are the pieces can start coming together because the pieces are available. And now we just need to, be able to bring them together and to understand what you're looking at. And I think a lot of times that's what we do at the museum, especially with the artifacts, is showing the artifacts so that people can understand not just the history, but make those connections and see that maybe that's just one part of the puzzle, and that history is complex.
And to piggyback off of what Marian was saying, what made me really excited about the project was the fact that, in this new digital generation, quick facts, quick news, that we were able to get this information on television with News 2.
News 2, yeah.
As Marian said, this information has always been stored. But I mean, we've always had genealogists and researchers who have been doing research since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The information has always been there, but you've had these very specific researchers who concentrated on this specific subject, whether it be a genealogist or academic researcher. But now with quick videos, social media, it's able to get to a broader audience. So you have this knowledge out there that there is a way for you to do this research, and that these materials are available and they're not locked up in a vault that is inaccessible to you. That this is information is very accessible, and that you have trained people who can help you decipher it. Talking directly to people at museums, this is an opportunity and a way to connect with the African American community, very, very specifically, who may not have any idea that there is a way to connect their present with their past. Some advice I can give, that it can open up some wounds, but it's conversations that need to be had in order for us as a society to deal with this particular period of time within history and move forward with an amicable thought on how to continue to process it. Because it's not about just having a conversation once, but this is something that needs to be discussed over time, because it took time. It happened, and it took time for things to get mired and bogged down in the negativity of slavery. So there is a lot to unpack. So you're definitely going to have to be prepared for that, and have to set up some things in ways for people. If they take this on, you have to set something up for people to be able to process the information that they're getting, because it can be jarring.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, having the programming, I think, is really important. Not just the exhibit, but having the programming to help have those conversations. Mm-hmm. Museums now are very much being encouraged, if they're not taking it on themselves, to be more transparent about history, especially if they're a community history museum. There's a lot of times that some of these hard subjects, the staff there just doesn't feel they're quite prepared to deal with. But if you have lots of partners and community partners, and for our exhibit, I mean, we had a laundry list full of partners who were helping us and being a part of this, and not just giving us advice and help, but also participating in programs and bringing us materials and helping us to give our visitors the means to find out about this stuff. So for a smaller museum in some of these smaller counties, this is a great opportunity for them to do things that maybe they wouldn't on their own want to jump into. But it gives them the opportunity to bring in maybe their audiences that have not come into their museums before, and may also give them the opportunity to use artifacts, which, first of all, maybe they don't know how significant they are, but secondly, that they've been maybe a little hesitant to think about bringing out because they have no quite how to present it. But I think, again, we've been trying to embrace being transparent, being honest, and that history is complex, and there's a lot of places to find answers and clues and to bring all that together. And that was really, I think, what we were doing in our exhibit, in our part of the exhibit when it came to High Point. One of the things we've been doing at the High Point Museum is trying really hard over the years to work with our history as, to be more transparent, to embrace its complexities, and to be honest about the more unfortunate aspects of our past. And I think that is a way to bring people in to have those conversations in a safe space, because we want people to see us as somewhere that doesn't have a point of view, that we're going to embrace an openness and allow people to learn about the past, how it's affected the future going forward, not the recent past as well as our future going forward. So we've been, I think, working towards those goals over time, and I think a lot of museums are. We're not unique in that, and that's why I think other counties, other places who might be thinking about doing this kind of exhibit or participating in the, having these deeds made available digitally, it's a great partnership for them to look into, because it can help move them along in a way that maybe they've been wanting to, but just not having had the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can speak for my department. The Heritage Research Center, where we specialize in genealogy and local history, we're an extension of that exhibit. When the exhibit goes away, we are the permanent place where you come and continue to deal with what was presented and what was put out there. So me and my staff, we're on the front lines of guiding people through this journey of tracing their family history and opening up these stories and guiding them through doing the research. And then we've helped a lot of people over the years, but specifically for African Americans, it's always like a source of joy for me to see someone kind of open their eyes to, I can research my family past 1900, or just to see their reaction to like a family member tracing their family from the present day to like 1865, because it just seems like such a far off, a far away time, which it actually is. It hasn't been that long ago, but it's just I don't know, like you can't beat the reaction of someone who didn't think that they could touch their family in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It seems unthinkable, and we actually get to do that on a daily and weekly basis. We actually had two patrons who found out that they actually were not Caucasian, just tracing their family history, and it tied into where they were saying that that everybody has these family secrets, or and this is pretty much across the board for people of anybody of any racial background. Old school does not like to talk about family, so but in these particular two cases, the family was upset that these patrons were delving into tracing the family history. So once it got to a certain point and they started digging into a certain decade, the family shut them out. Like, I'm not going to give you any information. And they would come to us and say, well, can you trace this? Because I think I'm right, but I'm not sure. And it's like, well, all roads lead to what you've already found. I mean, in one particular case, I had to ask my employee after the patron did the research and after I retraced the research, he did it again, and I told him, I was like, that's the family secret, because we just had to break down and ask her, it's like, this is why they don't want to talk about this, is because this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Your family got to a point in history and they passed as another race.
Parent, you have to understand what was going on, what is going on, and we knew that so many of our visitors were aware of how much the rise in interest of African American genealogy was, and here's helping to explain to somebody who may not understand the difficulties of that for African Americans to understand now why that was not just the genealogy was difficult, but dealing with the history in general is difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think we had enough time between when we were invited to host this exhibit and to when we installed it to really think through a lot of these things, and I think that's what made ours stronger. Made our exhibit strong. Working with the partners and bringing everybody in and really thinking through how we can make this something that everybody would not enjoy,
but
get something from.
Yeah.
This had nothing to do with enjoyment, I don't think at all.
But I will say this, and this is for anybody doing their family research. Delve into it, because it's not going to be that black and white split down the middle. I can say for myself, just on my own family research, that I have two branches of my family who have never been enslaved. One on my mother's side and one on my father's side. So it's worth delving into this research and find out what went on with your family, because it's not a black and white thing down the middle. It's shades of gray. So everybody's story is not going to be exactly the same.
systematic lie.